So for the last few weeks, we've been focusing on aspects of the face, doing planes of the face and drawing the face from the front and profile view so that we would start seeing the facial features as three-dimensional terrain rather than just outlines on a flat surface. So we've been going quite heavily into the face and the facial structure, but this week I kind of want to bring it all back to figure drawing. Having done what we did in the previous lessons, in this one we're going to sort of zoom back out, keep the heads a bit smaller, and look at a shorthand way to get the head down when you're doing a figure drawing. Because as you've seen from the figure drawing lessons that we've done, I like to work from the center of mass outwards, sort of the torso outwards. And so I often end up in the situation when I'm life drawing where I've kind of drawn the figure, I've done the things that I'm most keen to draw, and then I'm left with a decision. Do I put a head in or not? And I usually want to put some kind of head in, but I want to do it quickly. I don't want to get caught up worrying about the likeness of the model or anything. I just want to get something down to complete the drawing so that it looks right. It doesn't look too weird without a head or anything. And that's kind of what we're going to focus on tonight. How can we quickly just get the head down, not worrying about likeness, but trying to get its proportions kind of right, and also trying to use light and shadow to keep defining the forms, but in a real quick way. And this is really applicable across the board for street sketching, for underpainting, even if you are doing a portrait or something. It's just how can we block in a realistic head and face as quickly as possible. And the goal here is we don't want to be drawing outlines. We want to avoid drawing outlines as much as possible. We don't want to be drawing, the outline of the eye or the outline of the nose. We want to be jumping into light and shadow as quickly as possible. So I've tried to select references that'll help us do that. So looking at these four heads that we've got here, I'll just bring up the reference images that those came from. So I'll turn off the drawing now. So looking at the actual reference images, you can see that when you look at reality, immediately you just see detail. There's just stuff everywhere. You just go, oh my God, how can I draw that fast? There's so much going on. There's so much detail and light and shadow and all these contours. It's very complicated. So that's why I wanted to show you that. Now, if I turn the drawing back on and I'll slowly fade the photos, you can see how we can break those structures down into simple shapes and simple forms and simple areas of light and shadow. And I'll say again, we're not worrying about likeness here. So let's sketch these four through together first slowly. And then if we have time, I've got more references for us to go on with and kind of do in our own time. So starting at the top left with this guy, I just want to show you how I normally like to put the face in. I don't like sketching the circle for the skull first, because all I want to know is where is the face, the front of the face, and which way is it facing. So usually I will just put in a curve like this to represent the outer edge of the face, if we sort of see the face as a front curved plane. And then we might sort of, continue with the top of the head there and sketch in the other line, just so that we know there's the front plane of the face facing forward. So you can work along with me with this now. I'll just give you a second to do those lines. I might very lightly sketch kind of the eye line on that front plane. And then kind of jawline is the next thing I usually am thinking about. So we can sort of just block that in. Just a rough line. We won't go all the way back with that yet, because we're still constructing this head. We don't want to get lost in detail yet. We want to get the construction down first. Now that we have that front plane, we can put in the circle of the skull sort of back here. I really struggle to draw circles on my Cintiq here. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's glass or what, but it's really tough. All right, so there's the back of the skull. And then we might want to anchor the head now with the neck. Now, this guy's trap is coming up. His head's twisted, so his trap muscles coming up here. And the back of the neck's here. Notice how the back of the neck there is convex. It's not concave. Concave, sorry. Not concave, it's convex. Often it's good to notice that with the neck. It can be very easy to assume that it's concave. All right, so you can see how quickly we've already got a head in. Better than no head if you're life drawing. You could just leave it at that, but let's keep going. Now, the ear, let's block in sort of, even if it's just a block for that. That's sort of, you see this area that we're left with. We've got the front plane of the face, and then we've got this sort of side plane happening now between here and here. So the ear is often roughly, the front of it is in the middle of that. So that line I've just sketched. Now we can just block in a bit of an ear there. And we don't want to spend too long on this, so let's just really roughly put in these shadows for eyes. And when I'm drawing with charcoal, you know, especially if the head's kind of small on the page, you're just putting like a real just dark smudge there, and use your finger to smudge it out and hope that it ends up looking like an eye. And you get some interesting effects, you know, doing it that boldly. So that'll do for eyes for now, just a couple of lines. And let's put in the sort of front wedge shape of the nose, mostly focusing on the shadow under the nose here. And we've got the occlusion shadow where the lips meet of the mouth, so that's the main line of the mouth. And then the shadow under the bottom lip. And in interest of, you know, thinking in terms of light and shadow, not outline, let's put in another couple of shadows. We've got this shadow under his cheekbone over here. And we've got this little diamond type shadow under his chin, under his jaw. Let's put that in, and that's leading up to another little triangular shadow under his ear. And just those couple of shadows in the ear. Really, that's all we need, I think, here, because we want to focus on speed tonight, because this is I want to give you a technique to for putting in heads quickly when figure drawing. Let's go down to the girl on the bottom left now. She's facing similar direction to the guy we just did, but her head's tilted up a bit. And so to capture that, once again, let's sketch the outside curve of the front plane of her face. We can put in both those curved lines. But now, so how do we show that she's facing upwards here? We can slightly sketch in her eye line. So that eye line is positioned a little bit higher than the drawing we just did before, and it's curved like the top of the head. It's sort of curved like so. So just with that, we can already see what direction she's facing. Having got that front plane in, we can now put in the top and back of the skull, our sort of sphere. Again, and then anchor it with the neck lines here. And just to give it context, let's put in her trap muscles so that the head is connected to something. And that tells us something about her pose too. And there we go, we've got a sense of her pose here now. All right. Once again, the next sort of major form on her face is her nose. So we don't really want to sketch the front of her nose. Notice how there is no line at the front upper part of her nose. It's because the light's hitting there. So in reality, there is no line there. Now, you might sketch a very light one just as a guide for yourself, or to find your way to the base of the nose where the actual shadow is. But keep thinking in those terms. We want to think in terms of light and shadow, not just drawing lines everywhere to outline everything. And we've got these couple of dark masses for her eyes. I mean, her eyes are pretty much her upper lid and the iris and pupil is one mass. Working along that eye line that we sketched. And can put in some quick little dash for our eyebrows. And now the shadow here on her lip is, the upper one is the full downward facing plane of her upper lip. That's why it's a bit thicker than the guy's occlusion shadow where his lips meet. So that's what we're seeing there. So we can put that in as a solid block. And the little shadow under her bottom lip there. And see how quickly we can get a gesture or going on the face. Now there's also a bit of shadow under her camera right eyebrow going down to her eye. We could make that one solid mass if we wanted to, like that. And her ear now, because her head is tilted up, her ear is also at a slight angle. So that's why I sketched. Notice if you look at my eye line that I lightly sketched, how I wrapped it around the head to the side. And on the side of the head, that guideline, see how it's pointing downwards. It's not horizontal like the guys above. It's pointing downwards because that's the angle of her head. If you tilt your head up, your ears drop down. So following that same sort of rule before, roughly halfway there, we can start the ear. And that's it. Now we can sort of just connect everything up and look at these shadows that we've got here, the opportunities to define forms with shadow. We've got a nice solid shadow under her jaw, leading up to under her ear. This is why it looks so weird when someone shines a torch under their face, because it just reverses the light and shadow play that we're so used to, because we're so used to light coming from above. So everything looks exactly the opposite as it should. And we can drop in a bit of hairline for her. And because the light is coming from the upper left, we've got this shadow behind her. Her neck is casting a shadow over her trap muscle. That's what that solid shadow is there. And we can put this bun on her hair. It's also got its own shadow. All right. Let's go to the top right one. Let's do a full profile view now. A little bit harder to define the forms with light and shadow here. So once again, I like to find the front of the face here. So setting that main front plane there. Because this is full profile, notice how we're not going to be doing too frontal plane curves like we have on the first two, because we're totally profile. So once we've got the front plane, we can go straight back and put the circle. I'll sketch in a whole circle here to sort of show you what I mean with the skull. If it was like a solid circle, it would be something like that. And then we can put, let's put in the eye line. That's kind of always the next most important bit. So in this case, it's something like that. Now, the ear is blocked in this kind of space here, within that sphere. And now that once we have the ear, we can connect the jaw to that. Oops, that's a badly drawn jaw. And that gives us kind of the majority of the head, so we can now anchor that with the neck. Measuring, looking in the left and sort of noting where the line intersects to work out, where these necklines should be. Notice how the back of the neck kind of lines up with the top of the ear, so we can use stuff like that to help us get our measurement right. And to give some context, his shoulder is kind of raised, so we can put in a curve there like that. I'm going to erase out some of these guidelines here a bit. Right, next main form that we want is the nose. So put that in. Once we have that, we want to now jump straight into light and shadow. We don't want to muck around drawing everything in outlines. So with the light coming from above, I'm going to start with his upper brow here, and then just make that a solid mass coming down below that shadow that it's casting. And draw the upper lid. And I'm going to leave it at that. I want to keep this as simple as possible. Got the solid mass, solid sort of shadow of the upper lip. Yeah. And shadow below the lower lip. That's about it. Light's coming from the upper left, so we've got a shadow at the front of the neck under the jaw. And for sort of tonal reading, we can put in a bit of a hairline here. And fill that in with a bit of hatching or shading or whatever. Okay, and final one on this set. So we've got almost a it's sort of not quite a 3/4, but it's almost a 3/4 view from behind. Once again, if you just looked at the photo, you would think, oh, this is a tricky angle, but you can see with the drawing that I've done over the top that we can simplify it. The key is to keep modeling the head in your mind's eye as a three-dimensional object that you can rotate. So, as always, we'll start with the front plane of the face there. And we can put the eye line straight in, which in this case, we're not quite actually level with her. The camera is slightly higher. I think in this reference photo, the model was actually kneeling. So the camera is actually slightly higher, which means that the eye line is not horizontal, it's not flat, it curves back like this. So with that, we leave enough room for the forehead above, and then we start this, the curve of the top of her head going back. And because we're not level profile either, we're not sort of totally profile, whether we're slightly behind her, ear is slightly more forward. So the line for the sort of front of her ear is, instead of being in the center of that mass, of that sphere that we've just drawn, it's positioned slightly forward, maybe about here. So I'm going to actually block in the ear first because it sort of helps us orientate everything else. And there we go. With just those few lines, the front plane, the skull, and the ear, we've already got the direction of this head right now. Looks like we're slightly above, slightly behind. We just have a little protrusion there for her nose. Notice how the nose, if you're drawing it in profile, it always starts back from the front plane line that we drew for the front of the face, because, you know, it's indented. The top of the nose and the eyebrows like an indent. And curve that down. And then we can just put in a simple, solid sort of shadow mask to indicate her eye and the area below her eyebrow there. And that's just like a wedge facing outwards. All right, we continuously checking that looks like she's facing the right direction. And now we can just sort of, going back to the ear, we can now join the bottom of the ear to the jawline. And direction-wise, everything's looking okay. We can now put in the neck. And that's about it, because we're not seeing much of the front facial features there. We've once again got a shadow under the ear and leading down under the jaw. Once you get in the habit of drawing the head like this, you can do it in life drawing, you do it much faster, because you might not even worry about all the features. You might just put in some eyes and not worry about the mouth or whatever, whatever the pose calls for. But at least you have a method of getting a head in quickly. Just putting her hair, a few strokes for her hair on now, and the bun at the back. All right. So that's our 4 guide ones. I might bring up another 4 now without any guide drawing over the top of it, but just look at what we've just done and these references, and just keep this in mind so we don't get lost in the detail of the reference photos we're about to work from. We've got sort of 12 more minutes, so we'll just get done what we can. All right, some interesting angles here too. You can go at your own pace or follow along with me, but I'll still talk through what I'm doing. The top left one, 45-degree angle, and we're obviously below her. We're not side onto her, because we can see the underneath of her jaw there. So sketch the front of her face. and put in this eye line, which is very much a curved line like that. Notice how there's not much forehead because we're looking from such a low angle on her face there. And I'm gonna focus on getting the features down first, where the nose is and everything. Really constantly trying to simplify from reality, not trying to copy every detail. Just want to get the major forms in first and get the orientation right, the proportions right. Just like drawing the figure. Just want balance and proportion working as quickly as possible. Got the eye, nose, and we just need to put in the ear now. All right, the angle's looking okay. Simple shadow for the upper lip, as before. Little wedge for the lower lip shadow. And then can connect the ear to the jaw and to the mouth. Notice how we're so sort of underneath this model that the jaw wraps around. We can kind of see the neck connecting behind her jaw there, and the jaw wraps around the other side of it like this. And as soon as I put that line in, we can really, the angle becomes very clear on my drawing. And with the light coming from the top left still, we can put all of that in shadow. Just to help define the form, and same with some shadow behind the ear. And shadows in the ear. So we're really trying to make this like as simple as the drawings we were just doing before. Just a quick shorthand. All right, and the darkness in her hair here. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave that at that. Which one next? I'm going to move to the top right one. And it's a bit simpler again. We're slightly above her here. We're not level with our eyes. We're slightly above. This one's a bit like the first ones we did. We get the front plane of her head down. And eye line, which will be like a slightly convex curve. Oops, that was a bad stroke. I'll try that again. Something like that. With that, we can put in the sphere of the top of her head and back of her skull. And in this case, we're front on enough that I almost would like to put in a center line on that front plane of the face, just so that I know where that center is. Very lightly sketching a center line there. That allows me to then put in these eyes. So I'm just going to put in simple shadows. Two simple shadows, eyebrows. Because we want to think in terms of light and shadow, I'll connect this little shadow under her eyebrow down to her eye, and to the little shadow below that for her lower lid. And keep going on her face. We've got her nose. There's no line defining the front of her nose. Notice that. If you were to draw a dark line for the front of her nose, it would look weird because it's just not how light and form works. So we either want to sketch that very lightly, or we just want to do it in our mind and work our way to the bottom of the nose where we do have some shadow. And at this point, I want to keep connecting things, so I'm going to move over to her ear, which is pretty much in the center of that side plane as we sketched it. And bit of a now, because we're at a slightly higher angle to her, notice how her mouth, the top of her lip, is reasonably close to the base of her nose. And it's sort of a V shape, something like this. Although this is kind of details we don't want to worry about too much. If we were doing a figure drawing, we wouldn't be worried too much about this. And we can connect the shadow of her nose to her mouth there. And that's about it. Put in the chin, just connect. Once we've got all those features, we can just connect the jaw up to the ear. The light's coming from the right in this one, so it's a bit different to the ones we've done before. That's why there's no line under her ear, really. It's a little bit of a line at the top, but that's it. And I'm going to stop now because time's going to run out, and I just want to say a few more things. But yeah, okay. So anyway, I hope that's a useful way of tying everything we've been doing with drawing the face and head back in with figure drawing. In the terms of, we're now seeing everything in terms of three-dimensional planes, and we have a method for blocking those in as quickly as possible and finding a shorthand way of just putting in a face and head so that we can have one. And I just want to show you my method for doing that. I try to capture the front plane of the face. I want to know which way they're facing, what's the angle of the head, what's the angle of our view from above or below, and that is dictated by the curve of the eye line that we're sketching. And then we construct out from there, connecting the eyes to the ear, and then from the eyes down to the nose to the mouth. And then once we've got the ear and the mouth, we can then easily connect the base of the ear to the jaw and the chin to connect it all up. And then after that, it's just adding details and shadows. So I hope that's useful. When I do that with charcoal, when figure drawing, I'm just doing little dabs. And then if it looks wrong, I just grab my finger and I just smudge it out and just see what happens. And you can get some happy accidents that way. But yeah, that's it. And I would encourage you to keep trying to draw like this. Grab any photos. You can also do this with a ballpoint pen while you're eating breakfast. Grab a newspaper or whatever, a magazine, and a ballpoint pen, and sketch little heads, just, you know, the 2 centimeters big or whatever, and see if you can sketch them this way, just putting in light and shadow, just getting them down as quickly as possible in a couple minutes. It's really good practice for all aspects of drawing and painting. So, yeah. Thanks for
Thanks.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you. It was awesome.